Happens that whenever my in-laws are visiting, hello, that when there's these things when Jesus comes out and says, you will hate your in-laws and all things, my in-laws are here. The first time my parents came to hear me speak, to give a sermon, it was the gospel where Jesus said, like, hate your mother and father, and I'm like, oh gosh, God, why did you do this to me? But I don't know about you, but besides the fact that my in-laws are here during this one, I always feel a bit uncomfortable when we come to passages like this gospel reading we heard in the morning. More often than not, we hear Jesus visiting the poor, visiting and touching and healing lepers, having dinner with folks who most people wouldn't be caught dead being near, let alone eating with. We talk a lot about Jesus as the image of love. And our presiding bishop often says, if it's not about love, it's not about God. God loved the world so much that he sent his son not to condemn the world, but to save it. But this morning we hear from a guy who seems pretty different from all that. I came to bring fire, and I wish that it were already kindled. You think I came to bring peace to the earth? No. I am here to bring division. Thank you, Bethany. Gosh, this is so nice. Yeah, I came to bring division. Father versus son, daughter versus mother. There's this great little cartoon. I posted it on Facebook, so if you're on the Facebook parishioner group, you saw it. But it's this great little one-panel comic, and it's a bunch of people with these giant pencils, and they're kind of making lines on the ground and making themselves boxes. And Jesus is there in the middle of it with a crown of thorns, erasing all of those lines. It gets passed around a lot. But that's not the Jesus, it seems, who we find this morning in the gospel. Now, when Jesus talks like this, it often rubs us Christians the wrong way. And it can especially rub us Episcopalians the wrong way. We want to see a peace-loving, open-armed, love-centered Jesus. And for many of us, that's the Jesus who we meet in the Eucharist. That's the Jesus who gives us the courage to go out and do some pretty tough ministry. That's the Jesus who gives us the support to do a lot of the work in the church, from the sacrament of reconciliation to doing the social work that we really are called to be doing. And it's easy to look away from these verses and focus on the ones that we like, that support our work of justice, or that just sound more comforting. But while we might be uncomfortable with these kind of words, the people of Jesus' time were probably insulted. Their culture was based on kinship groups. You know, I can go and move to Japan and my mom can complain about it, but really in this period, in Jesus' period, you need to be close to your group. Your group gives you the identity of who you are. Honor your parents was one of the 10 Commandments. The book of Ruth in the Old Testament is all about trying to figure out or trying to find the person that two widows can be taken care of. The person, sorry, I got lost in that sentence. The person who will take care of these two widows. That's what the book of Ruth is about. You shouldn't be found talking to some social groups and some cultural groups, especially the Samaritans. And we see the disciples flip out when Jesus talks to a woman by the well. Not because of who she is, but just because she's a woman. And Jesus, what are you doing talking to women? Or even children. Jesus, get them away. And Jesus flips out at them and says, bring the children to me. When people in Jesus' time heard this stuff about division, right in the middle of the unifying part of their life, they probably said, like, they said about other teachings, this is a hard lesson, and walked away. So what does Jesus mean by these comments of division? Well, first we need to consider what type of person Jesus was. And Jesus was deeply, deeply interested in fundamentals. Not that he was a fundamentalist, which we use in our culture a lot today. And a fundamentalist being someone who has this kind of do or die attitude. You're with us or against us. You believe X, Y, and Z, and if you don't, then I'm mad at you. Not that kind of fundamentalist, but Jesus was interested in the brass tacks of a person's life in God. His questions, his stories and parables, the arguments he makes, the things he taught about God and humanity, the law, and the world, all of it, asked very simple and very important questions. And the very important question at the foundation of it, to whom do you give your ultimate allegiance? Where do you keep your heart? When faced with a crisis, how do you act? What, when the going gets tough, do you look to for help and solace? From what place or relationship or idea or philosophy do you make your decision on how to speak or act or how to live your life? What is your foundation? And the hard lesson of Jesus that Jesus is teaching here is that before your family, before the most important people in your life, before everything you've learned in your culture and that you hold sacrosanct, before all of it, your foundation needs to be on God. It needs to be on love. And dedicating yourself to God and to love, capital L, love, isn't going to make your life easier. Actually, it's going to make your life a whole lot messier. And the focus of Jesus' lesson today is on this messiness. Now, I'm explaining a lot of this up here in the head, very intellectually. I'm kind of going through and thinking about it. So let's think for a moment with our spirits or our hearts or even our guts. In your life, have you experienced something that has changed your life forever? And I'm not just talking about like the where you live, what you're doing kind of things, like if you get fired from a job, you meet a new friend, you go on a trip. Those are important things. I'm talking about the plain facts of life, but about how things like getting fired, meeting a new friend, or taking a great trip struck you to the core. Think about a time when you were struck at your heart. Compunction is the big word for today. And maybe immediately, maybe over a long period of time, that you knew from this that nothing could ever be the same again. Think about that. So as an example, for me, I remember traveling in Thailand. A bunch of us friends had gone to Thailand and just kind of traveled around and whatnot. And it was the year after a really big tsunami hit Phuket, which was one of the big cities. I think it's it's not the capital, but a big city. A horrible, horrible tsunami hit it and just destroyed it. And here I was, a middle-class kid from New Jersey with a great education, a good job, and even the ability to travel. And I was told that you need to bring cash to Thailand. So here's innocent Tim. I had $1,000 worth of cash in my wallet, just kind of, sitting there. And I was wondering all the time with like my hand over my pocket, like, oh gosh, someone's going to rob me. No one robbed me. But so here's this starry-eyed kid who suddenly meets real destruction and real poverty. My dad had every once in a while driven through parts of the United States that were in poverty, so I saw that. I knew about it in my head. But this was the first time when I realized that, staying in a 5-star hotel on the beach cost about $30. And that $30 could feed a family for an entire month. And here I had $1,000 in my pocket. You can't unsee that kind of stuff. It changes you. It changes the things in your life that were really, really important. They're not so important anymore. And it takes things that you barely thought about and puts them in the center. Other things gain weight and focus and clarity. Your life is turned upside down and suddenly it gets very messy and unclear, but somehow it's for the better. Has this ever happened to you? Maybe you didn't go to Thailand. I don't know. It's a nice place. Spicy food, be careful. Really spicy food. Maybe it's not something like poverty. I know a lot of people who were alcoholics and were struck one day with how low their life had gotten. Some people had just seen, a family that was functional. Someone had seen maybe something that they'd done, and it kind of struck them to the heart. And they knew suddenly and fiercely that nothing was more important than getting sober for them. I have a friend who just became a dad. This is a different example. And before, his online posts were all really edgy and had this distinct challenge to the world. And now his pictures are of his little baby lying on his chest and this beautiful, peaceful look over this guy's face. I had never known a man so angry and resentful and frustrated. He had a rough upbringing. And to see this beautiful, peaceful look on his face with this tiny little baby there, I could see this guy's not the same at all, and he's never going to be the same because of this little child right here. But these changes of heart come with a sacrifice. Going to Thailand and seeing poverty struck me, and it struck me with what I do with my money, time, my vocation, but it also felt like powerlessness, this feeling of how can I help anybody? I went around and literally started giving money to people who looked like beggars. I don't even know if they were, but it totally messed with my mind. I needed to do something. And some, unfortunately, for alcoholics, some lose their friendships because their friendships are based on alcohol and going out and drinking. And some people who come from alcoholic families, they face anger and resentment from their parents or their siblings because you're kind of throwing up the guilt in their face that we need to stop this because it's hurting us. Or a friend in academia joked with me. He said, "Every kid you have is 2 books you didn't write." And he said this with 2 children, 2 wonderful children. And I know for a fact that he never doubted for a second that those 4 books he didn't write weren't, equal to the weight of having his beautiful children. But in terms of his career, he needed to sacrifice that because he loved his children so much. Dedicating our lives to love and experiencing love and living love isn't all rainbow and sunshines. Christian discipleship does not mean you're going to be cool at parties, or that you'll get a really high-paying job, or that you can spend your day relaxing on the beach. All good things and gifts from God, but dedicating your life to love means that you're going to be with people in desperate pain. You're going to get your hands dirty washing the dishes at the Samaritan Center and come home stinking of food and having to take a shower. For some, it might mean losing family or friends because you've put your foot down and said, I can't live this way anymore. These are tough decisions to make. And it's what Jesus is warning his listeners about and warning us here today at Christ Church. Dedicating yourself to love is hard work because the world isn't always about love and about joy and forgiveness. Sometimes it's about the opposite, and you need to speak, I don't want to quote Roosevelt, speak loudly and carry a big stick, but that you need to be prepared for this work of love. Living a real, true Christian life takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of humility. And it takes something else, and I'll end with this. We Christians aren't asked to live on principles or ideas or the answers to catechism questions from the BCP. There is a catechism in there. We're not founded on that. Those are good for education, for remembering what we've already learned but forgotten for some reason. They're important but not foundational. No, we have been asked to live on the experience of God, of love, not just that lived 2,000 years ago, but love that is right here, right now, waiting for us to look towards it and live with it. I've told you some of the experiences in my life and some of the people who I've met who have chosen love as opposed to something else. What about you? Have you chosen love above something else, and what have you sacrificed for that? Have you seen some people who have had to walk away from great relationships and great friends because it was making them sick? Have you seen someone who was struck totally and deeply by joy that their life was never the same again? Maybe we can't put it into words like how you listen to music and you know some of it's just absolutely true, but you can't really explain what that means. You can only live it. Maybe it's something you don't talk about because it's kind of embarrassing, experience you've had. Maybe it's something you don't even want to think about in the secret quarters of your heart, but you know that you've been changed by that. Whatever the case, these are gifts from God, and we base our lives on them. And we know they're gifts from God because these experiences open our hearts in new ways to our neighbors. They lessen our rage and our hatred and fill the empty spaces in us with equal mixtures of peace and dedication. They may lead us to divisions with folks we love, but they also ask us to live truthfully because real relationships are founded on love and love alone. And because we have a God of reconciliation, often those relationships that were strained or even broken can be repaired and brought back in resurrection to a life that's deeper and fuller and more healing for all involved.